In the heart of Seoul, the hall was filled with chatter, or particularly congratulating the businessman of the year, the CEO of Jun Industries, Mr. Jun. It is the business gala at the end of year which Mr. Jun attend with his family, and as same goes with the Yoon family, who are also present there to join the proud moment of their family friend. Mr. Yoon and Mr. Jun are standing together, holding glasses of champagne. They are younger, their faces less lined with worry, and their camaraderie is apparent. Mr. Yoon smiled and said, "Jun, it's been years since we started out in the industry. Remember those endless nights working on those tiny deals, just trying to make a name for ourselves?" Mr. Jun chuckled lightly and replied, "And look at us now. Yoon Corporation and Jun Industries dominating the market. Who would have thought?" The two clink their glasses and laugh, their friendship evident. A young YN, no more than 8 years old, peeks shyly from behind her mother's skirt. Across the room, a 10-year-old Jungkook sits with his mother, laughing as she feeds him cake. The families exchange pleasantries, and the children are introduced. Mrs. Yoon smiled and coaxed her daughter, YN, "Come say hello to Mr. Jun and his family." YN steps forward hesitantly, her big eyes curious. Mrs. Jun smiles warmly at her, kneeling down to her level. Mrs. Jun gently pat the little girl's head and said, "You're such a lovely girl, YN. I'm sure you'll grow up to be as graceful as your mother." Jungkook, eating another piece of cake, looks up and frowns at YN. He with a teasing smile asks her, "Do you like cake? I bet you can't eat as much as me." YN glares at him, her cheeks puffing up in indignation. YN defiantly retorted, "I can eat more than you if I want to." The adults laugh as YN and Jungkook start bickering like typical children. This was the day when their relationship take a turn of enemies. They completed their elementary school like this, and then Jun family moved to America to expand their business, and eventually the contact gets cut between both the families. Mr. Yoon is pacing anxiously, stacks of papers and bills spread out on the coffee table. His business partner sits across from him, shaking his head grimly. Mr. Yoon's desperation is evident. There has to be another way. We've worked too hard to lose everything now. His business partner sighed, "I wish there was, but the debts are piling up. If we don't secure funding soon, the company is finished." The doorbell rings. Mrs. Yoon answers it, revealing Mr. Jun, Jungkook's father, dressed sharply and exuding an air of authority. Mrs. Yoon was surprised to see him after all these years. "Mr. Jun smiled calmly and asked, "May I come in?" Mr. Yoon's expression shifts from anxiety to reluctant hope as he gestures for him to sit. They exchange pleasantries before Mr. Jun gets straight to the point. Mr. Jun coolly said, "I've heard about your situation. It's unfortunate, but I believe I can help." Mr. Yoon leans forward, his tone eager. Mr. Yoon in urgency said, "If you can, I'd be forever grateful." "What are your terms?" Mr. Jun leans back, steepling his fingers as a calculating look crosses his face. Mr. Jun deliberately said, "My son, Jungkook, is of marriageable age. Your daughter, YN, is intelligent and from a respected family. A union between our families would be mutually beneficial." Mrs. Yoon, who has been listening silently, gasps in surprise. She hesitatingly asks, "Are you suggesting an arranged marriage?" Mr. Jun nodded his head agreeing, "Precisely. I'll clear your debts, fund your company's recovery, and ensure your family remains in good standing. All I ask is that YN marries Jungkook." Mr. Yoon looks conflicted, torn between saving his business and his daughter's future. Mr. Yoon in a stubble and barely audible voice said, "This isn't a decision I can make lightly." Mr. Jun references their shared history. Mr. Jun reminisced with his friend and said, "Yoon, we've known each other for decades. Our families have shared countless memories, and our friendship has stood the test of time." He pauses, his expression becoming serious. Mr. Jun said firmly with confidence and a lingering hope, "That's why I believe this marriage isn't just a solution for your business, it's an opportunity to strengthen the bond between our families." Mr. Yoon sighs, conflicted but understanding the weight of their history and the opportunities it could provide. Mr. Jun said while standing before moving towards the main door, "Think it over, but don't take too long. My offer won't remain on the table forever." He adjusts his suit jacket, and walks toward the door. Before leaving, he paused. He softly said, "Sometimes, sacrifices are necessary for the greater good." As the door closes, Mr. and Mrs. Yoon exchange worried looks. Now both the parents were in conflict that how to convince their daughter for this marriage, knowing precisely how much their daughter hates being controlled and is a free bird and queen of her own life. The days went by and the college last year got started. It is almost a week for the conversation between Mr. Jun and Mr. Yoon, but still they had not talked to their children yet. On a bright autumn morning, the campus is bustling with life, students laughing, exchanging notes, and hurrying to class. YN is running across the corridor, her bag slipping off her shoulder, and arms full of books. She turns a corner too quickly and crashes straight into a broad and bulky chest of Jungkook, who's holding his sketchpad, causing his papers scatter everywhere. Frustrated was evident on YN's face and she murmured, "Oh, come on. Can this day get any worse?" She bends down to gather her books, barely noticing Jungkook glaring at her. Jungkook wiped the dust from his sketchpad and coldly retorted, "Maybe try looking where you're going next time." YN snapped back at him, "Maybe try standing somewhere that's not in everyone's way." YN picks up one of his sketches and pauses, admiring the intricate details before shoving it back at him. She grudges and said, "Nice sketch, by the way. Too bad it belongs to someone so rude." Jungkook dryly and without any emotion replied, "Thanks. I live for compliments from people who can't walk straight." They lock eyes for a moment, tension crackling in the air. YN scoffs and storms off, leaving Jungkook behind, muttering under his breath. In a lively college classroom, students are chatting, and the professor hasn't arrived yet. YN sits at her desk, scribbling in her notebook, her frustration evident. Mia plops down beside her, grinning excitedly. "Oh my god, YN, have you seen the new guy?" she stated, leaving YN rolling her eyes and muttering, "If you mean Jungkook, then unfortunately, yes." Mia giggled on her remark and exclaimed, "Unfortunately? Are you serious? He's gorgeous. Half the girls in college are swooning over him." YN dryly replied, "Well, they can have him. The guy is insufferable." Mia tilted her head and asked, "Insufferable? What did he even do?" YN groaned and said, "Everything he shouldn't have. I ran into him this morning and the fault was his, but still put it on me, saying that I should have eyes. I mean, he was in the way. The nerve of that guy." Mia laughing stated, "Oh, come on. He is just nice." YN retort with evident frustration, "Niece. I don't even know what everyone sees in him." Mia leans in, her eyes sparkling and teasingly said, "Maybe you're just jealous." YN deadpan and replied, "Of what?" "His oversized ego." Mia smirked and continued, "No, of the fact that he's the most gorgeous guy on campus and you can't admit it." YN throws her pen down, glaring at Mia, but there's a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. She sighed and surrendered, "You're impossible, Mia." Mia grinned and retort back, "And you're just in denial." The professor walks in, cutting their conversation short, leaving YN with annoyed expression, contrasting with Mia's dreamy smile. Yoon family's warm and cozy dining room is filled the aroma of dinner that fills the air, but no one is eating. Her parents sit across from her, their faces clouded with worry. The clinking of silverware fills the tense silence. The tension is evident as both the parents has decided to express their worries and need. Mr. Yoon clears his throat and started, "YN, we need to talk about something important." YN looks up from her plate, sensing the seriousness of his tone. She asked, "What's wrong, Dad?" Mrs. Yoon hesitated but continued, "Our company, it's in trouble." YN shocked and asked, "What? How? What happened?" Mrs. Yoon hesitatingly replied, "A major investor pulled out. We don't have the funds to keep things running." YN with concern asked her parents, isn't there something we can do? Her father hesitates, then sighed deeply. He said, there's one option. Jungkook's father offered to bail us out, but there's a condition. YN looks between her parents, her heart sinking. She narrowed her eyes and continued, what kind of condition? Mr. Yoon said, he wants you to marry Jungkook. Silence fills the room as YN processes the words. Her fork clatters onto her plate. The words hit YN like a ton of bricks. She stares at her parents in disbelief. She shockingly replied, what? You can't be serious. I barely know him, and when I do, he's arrogant, rude and impossible to deal with. And I don't even like him. Mrs. Yoon pleadingly retorted, we wouldn't ask this of you if there were any other way. Please, YN, we're out of options. YN storms out of the room, conflicted and angry. The college canteen is bustled with students scattered around, laughing and eating. YN sits at a corner table, stirring her drink absent-mindedly. Mia joins her tray loaded with snacks. She cheerfully starts, hey, YN. You won't believe what I heard. Wait, why do you look like someone just ruined your life? YN glances up, her expression a mix of frustration and disbelief. She flatly stated, because someone did. Mia frowned and asked, what happened? Did you fail a test? YN snapped back, worse. My parents just told me I'm getting married. Mia freezes mid-bite, her eyes wide. Mia stammer and asked, what? Married? To who? YN sarcastically said, take a wild guess. Mia's fork clatters onto her tray as realization dawns. She whispered, no way, you mean, Jungkook. YN nods, her jaw tightening. Mia leans back, her expression a mix of shock and something else, jealousy masked as disbelief. She awkwardly stated, I mean, wow. That's unexpected. YN with bitter voice snapped back, tell me about it. My dad's business is struggling, and Jungkook's dad swooped in with this brilliant idea to save the day. Mia hesitated but continued, but, I mean, it's Jungkook. He's, handsome and rich. YN retort with angerness, and arrogant and impossible. This isn't some fairy tale, Mia. This is my life. Mia looks away, biting her lip, her expression unreadable. After a moment, she forces a smile and softly said, maybe it won't be so bad. Who knows, you might even end up liking him. YN glared at her and stated, not helping, Mia. The tension hangs heavy as YN goes back to stirring her drink, her frustration palpable. Mia fidgets with her napkin, her jealousy simmering beneath the surface. The next day, YN meets Jungkook at a quiet cafe to discuss the situation. He's already seated, sipping a black coffee, his expression unreadable. She gets seated across from him and stated, so, I guess we're getting married. Jungkook leaned back on the chair and a smirk formed on the corner of his lips and replied, sounds like a dream come true, doesn't it? YN sarcastically retorted, oh, absolutely. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with someone who barely knows how to smile. Jungkook scoffed and said, try to hide your enthusiasm, though. It's blinding. She glared at him and continued with a sarcastic tone, oh, don't flatter yourself. I'm doing this for my family, not for you. Jungkook continued with a calm voice, good. The less feelings involved, the better. Let's keep it that way. This is a deal, not a fairy tale. YN glares at him, but deep down, she feels the weight of the decision. The marriage gets scheduled after a week, so both YN and Jungkook continue the college. YN is sitting on the college lawn, frustrated and attempting to fix her broken bag strap. Jungkook, passing by, stops when he notices her struggling. The sun is shining brightly, students are scattered around chatting and laughing, but there's an air of unease as YN notices Jungkook walking toward her. Jungkook calmly asks her, need help? YN looks up, startled, but quickly brushes him off. She curtly replied, no, I'm fine. Jungkook raises his eyebrow and retorted, Sure doesn't look like it. You've been fumbling with that strap for 5 minutes. Before YN can protest, Jungkook kneels down, takes the bag, and starts fixing it. His movements are swift and precise. YN grumbled and said, "I didn't ask for your help, you know." Jungkook smirked and replied, "Yeah, but I'm helping anyway. Don't want you walking around with a broken bag, it's a safety hazard." YN watches him quietly, unsure whether to be annoyed or grateful. Jungkook fixes the strap and hands the bag back to her, their fingers brushing briefly. She softly showing gratitude said, "Thanks. I guess." Jungkook said in teasing tone, "Don't mention it. I'll send you the repair bill later." He walks off with a small smirk, leaving YN flustered but also strangely intrigued. She watches him disappear into the crowd, a mix of confusion and curiosity in her eyes. The wedding venue is beautifully decorated, but there's a palpable tension in the air. YN is standing at the altar, looking up nervously as Jungkook walks toward her, his expression unreadable. Her heart pounding, she whispered to herself, "This is it?" Jungkook standing across from her, the weight of the moment settling between them. He catches her eye, and for the first time, there's no animosity, only something deeper, a quiet understanding. Officiant with a beam smile started, "Do you, YN, take Jungkook to be your lawfully wedded husband?" YN voice steady, despite the nerves. She gathered herself and replied, "I do." Officiant turns to Jungkook and continued, "And do you, Jungkook, take YN to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Jungkook pauses, looking at YN with a mixture of affection and vulnerability, then nods slowly, voice low but clear and retorted, "I do." The officiant wraps the ceremony by saying, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Jungkook leans in, the kiss soft but full of meaning, a promise for what's to come. The crowd fades away as they share this intimate moment, their past grievances forgotten, at least for now. The wedding is over, Andon and Jungkook enter their new apartment for the first time. The space is modern but feels cold and unfamiliar. Both are awkward, unsure of how to start a conversation. YN places her suitcase near the door and glances around, avoiding Jungkook's eyes. Jungkook sighs and runs a hand through his hair before breaking the silence. "So, this is it? Our new home?" YN replied quietly, "Yeah." There's a heavy pause as both of them struggle to find the right words. Jungkook finally leans against the wall, crossing his arms. He hesitant but continued, "Look, I know neither of us wanted this. It's weird." YN nodded in agreement and said, "Yeah, weird is one way to put it." She finally meets his eyes, her expression guarded but vulnerable. She firmly stated, "But since we're here now, we need to set some boundaries. I don't want this to be harder than it already is." Jungkook nodded and retorted, "Agreed. Boundaries are good." He pauses, then smirks slightly, trying to lighten the mood. He joked, like, "No stealing my snacks." YN rolled her eyes and retorted back, "Are you serious right now?" Jungkook shrugged, "Just trying to make this less awkward." YN lets out a small laugh despite herself, and for a moment, the tension lifts. But then she looks down at her hands, her voice softening. She gently stated, "I didn't want to be here, but I guess we're stuck with each other." Jungkook with a sincere tone said, "Same here. But maybe, we can try to make the best of it." There's a vulnerable honesty in his tone that catches YN off guard. She looks at him, and for the first time, there's a flicker of understanding between them. YN softly replied, "Maybe." They both sit on opposite ends of the couch, the silence now less heavy, fading in the show of the city lights glowing through the apartment windows. The morning sun filters through the curtains, and YN is already awake, standing outside the bathroom door with her toiletries in hand. She bangs on the door impatiently and with annoying tone almost shouts, "Jungkook, how much longer are you going to take? I need to get ready too." Inside, Jungkook is brushing his teeth, his hair messy and still damp from his shower. He smirks at the sound of her voice and teasingly replied, "Patience is a virtue, YN. Learn it." YN gritted her teeth and snapped back, I swear, if you don't come out in the next 2 minutes, I'm breaking down the door. The door suddenly opens, and Jungkook steps out, a towel draped over his shoulders. He grins at her, clearly enjoying her irritation. He smirks and continued, relax, princess. The bathroom is all yours. YN glares at him as she storms past, slamming the door shut while Jungkook heads to the kitchen, still chuckling. YN sits at the breakfast table with a piece of toast in hand, glaring at Jungkook. She accusingly said, "Did you use all the hot water?" Jungkook, shrugging his shoulder, replied, "Maybe." Unsarcastically retorted at him, "Great. Just perfect." Jungkook bites into his toast, clearly unfazed. YN checks the time on her phone and gasps. She panicking state, "We're going to be late for college." Jungkook, with calmness, said, "Then hurry up." Unhurriedly grabs her bag and heads to the door, but Jungkook lingers, tying his shoes at an agonizingly slow pace. YN glares at him and snapped, "Are you doing this on purpose?" Jungkook innocently asked, "Doing what?" YN groaned and surrender, "You're impossible." Jungkook finally stands, grabbing his bag. He grins back at her, "Relax, I'll drive you." YN is sitting in the college cafeteria with Mia and a few other friends when she spots Jungkook entering from the corner of her eye. She immediately looks away, pretending not to notice. Jungkook catches her glance and smirks, walking over to grab a drink from the counter. Mia notices YN's sudden nervousness and raises an eyebrow and curiously asks her, "Are you okay?" "You're acting weird," YN quickly replied, "I'm fine. Totally fine." As Jungkook walks past their table, he accidentally drops a pen near YN's feet. She freezes, glaring at him as he picks it up. Jungkook smirks just enough for her to see and whispered, "Relax, wifey. Your secret's safe with me." YN's eyes widen as he walks away, leaving her fuming. Mia watches the exchange suspiciously, but YN quickly changes the subject. She quickly brings the attention to her. "So, what were we talking about?" YN glares at Jungkook from across the room, her frustration clear, while Jungkook simply smirks, enjoying her discomfort. It's late in the evening. Jungkook and YN are standing in the kitchen, glaring at each other over a pile of unwashed dishes. YN crossed her arms and with a raising eyebrow said, "I did them yesterday. It's your turn." Jungkook leans against the counter and replied with lingering smirk, "I cooked dinner. That means you do the dishes. Fair trade." YN scoffs and retorted, "Fair? You call instant ramen cooking? That barely counts." Jungkook shrugs it off and smugly stated, "Still counts. You're just trying to get out of it." YN grabbed a sponge, frustration evident on her face. Surrender, "Fine. But next time, I'm making you scrub the bathroom. No shortcuts." Jungkook grins as he walks away, "Deal. But don't expect me to enjoy it." YN mutters under her breath while scrubbing a plate, "The day he does real chores, pigs might actually fly." Jungkook stops at the doorway, turning to look at her. Jungkook grins and teasingly asked, "Did you say something?" YN fakes a smile and replied, "Nothing. Just praying for patience." Jungkook chuckles and disappears into his room. YN yelled from the kitchen, "I hope you trip on your way in." The sound of Jungkook's laughter echoes as YN groan in frustration. It's late at night in their apartment. YN is sitting at the dining table, her laptop open and papers scattered everywhere. She looks tired, rubbing her temples as she tries to focus on her assignment. Jungkook walks into the room, holding a glass of water, and pauses when he sees her. Jungkook softly said, "You've been at it for hours. You should take a break." YN looks up, surprised by his tone. "There's no teasing, just concern." She sighed and replied, "I can't. This is due tomorrow, and I'm barely halfway done." Jungkook sets his glass down on the counter and walks over, pulling out the chair across from her. Jungkook leans back and asks, "Want me to help?" YN raised an eyebrow and asked back with surprise, "You Help. Jungkook chuckles, but there's a hint of sincerity in his voice. He smiled and said, "Hey, I'm not completely useless, you know." YN lets out a small laugh, surprising even herself. She pushes some of the papers toward him. She teasingly retorted, "Fine. Let's see what you've got, Mr. Genius." They start working together, and the atmosphere gradually shifts. Their bickering fades, replaced by quiet cooperation. At one point, YN leans over to grab a paper, and their hands accidentally touch. They both freeze, the moment stretching between them. YN quickly snapped out and said, "Sorry." Jungkook softly states, "It's fine." They go back to work, but the air is charged. Later, when they finally finish, YN leans back in her chair, exhaling deeply. YN smiles and genuinely said, "Thanks, Jungkook. I actually mean it this time." Jungkook looks at her, his usual smirk replaced by a soft smile. He quietly replied, "You're welcome." There's a moment of silence as they look at each other, something unspoken passing between them. YN quickly breaks the eye contact, standing up to gather her papers. She nervously said, "I should, get these ready for submission." Jungkook watches her for a moment before standing up too. He softly said, "You're not as annoying as I thought, you know." YN turns to look at him, her eyebrows raised. She playfully asks, "Is that your way of saying you like me now?" Jungkook smirks, but there's a softness in his eyes. He with a teasing tone snapped back, "Don't push it." YN rolls her eyes, but there's a small smile on her lips as she heads to her room. Jungkook watches her go, his expression unreadable, before turning off the kitchen light. The night is calm, and the moonlight pours into the apartment, casting a soft glow on everything it touches. Jungkook sits on the couch, his sketchpad on the coffee table in front of him. He stares at the blank page, lost in thought. YN watches him from the kitchen, holding 2 steaming mugs of cocoa. She hesitates, observing the way his shoulders sag under the weight of emotions he's too proud to share. With quiet determination, she walks over and sits beside him, close enough to feel his warmth but giving him space to breathe. She softly started, "I thought you might need this. You've been at it for hours." Jungkook glances at her, surprised but grateful. He takes the mug from her hands, their fingers brushing briefly. The small touch sends a shiver up YN's spine. He quietly thanks her. A long silence stretches between them, but it's not uncomfortable. YN leans forward, her gaze falling on the untouched sketchpad. She gently asked, "Can I see what you're working on?" Jungkook tenses slightly, his fingers drumming against the mug. After a moment, he sets it down and sighs, leaning back against the couch. He lowly states, "It's nothing yet. Just memories I can't seem to let go of." YN tilts her head, her voice soft and steady, "Memories of your mum." Jungkook's throat bobs as he swallows hard. His voice is barely audible, laced with pain. He whispered, "Yeah, she used to sing to me at night." Her voice, it was like a warm hug, even when the world outside was falling apart. His voice falters, and YN watches as his walls begin to crack. He lets out a shaky breath, his eyes fixed on the moonlight streaming through the window. He continued, "After she died, I thought things couldn't get worse. But then, my stepmom. She hated me. She made sure I knew it every single day." He clenches his fists, the memory of his stepmother's harsh words and cold eyes flooding his mind. YN reaches out, placing a gentle hand on his arm and calmly said, "Jungkook, I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Her touch seems to ground him. He looks at her, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. For the first time, he doesn't pull away. Instead, he leans into her touch as if searching for comfort. Jungkook's voice trembled, "I've been alone for so long, YN. I didn't think anyone could understand." YN shifts closer, her heart aching for him. She cups his cheek, her thumb brushing away a tear that escapes down his face. Her voice is steady, filled with conviction. YN gently replied, "You're not alone anymore. I'm here, Jungkook." And I'll stay, no matter how hard it gets. Jungkook closes his eyes, leaning into her palm. The raw vulnerability in his expression tugs at YN's heart. Slowly, hesitantly, he raises his hand and covers hers. Jungkook softly express, you make me feel like I'm worth something again. Like I'm not broken. Their eyes meet, and the air between them shifts, electric yet tender. Jungkook leans forward, his voice a whisper. He quietly asks for permission, can I? YN nods, her voice barely audible, yes. Jungkook leans in, capturing her lips in a soft, lingering kiss. It's tentative at first, as if he's afraid she might pull away, but when she responds, the kiss deepens. It's a kiss filled with unspoken emotions, grief, longing, and the beginnings of love. When they finally pull back, their foreheads rest together, their breaths mingling. Jungkook chuckles softly, his voice lighter than it's been in years. He smiled and said, I think I'm falling for you. YN laughs softly, her cheeks flushed. She teasingly asked, you think? Jungkook grins, his hand sliding to her waist, pulling her closer. He smirks and continued, okay, I know. YN wraps her arms around his neck, her voice soft but filled with warmth, you're not alone in that. He kisses her again, this time with more confidence, his hands framing her face as if she's the only thing keeping him grounded. The world outside fades, leaving just the two of them in their small cocoon of comfort and vulnerability. Hours pass as they sit together, talking about everything and nothing. Jungkook opens up in a way he never has before, sharing stories of his childhood, the good and the bad. YN listens intently, her hand never leaving his. When sleep finally pulls them under, they're curled up on the couch together, the moonlight illuminating the peace on Jungkook's face. The next day in college courtyard, YN and Mia are sitting on a bench during a free period. YN is looking through her notes while Mia feigns concern, masking her true intentions. She casually started, YN, can I ask you something? YN get distracted and said, yeah, sure. Mia hesitates, fiddling with her bracelet to seem nervous. She hesitantly asked, have you noticed anything off about Jungkook lately? YN looks up, confused. She frowned and replied, off? No. Why? Mia sighed, it's just. I don't know how to say this, but I saw him with someone the other day. YN's expression hardens slightly, but she tries to stay calm. She firmly stated, Mia, if you have something to say, just say it. Mia, pretending to be reluctant, said, okay. I saw him with another girl at the library. They were sitting really close, and she was laughing at everything he said. It just looked intimate, you know. YN's heart skips a beat, but she shakes her head and confidently retorted, Jungkook wouldn't do that. He's not like that. Mia leans closer, her voice dropping to a whisper, and she gently states, I thought so too. But I couldn't ignore how comfortable they looked together. I didn't want to tell you, but I thought you should know. YN forces a small smile, trying to brush it off, but doubt begins to creep in. Mia notices her hesitation and smirks internally. Mia decides to escalate her plan. She approaches Jungkook in the library, pretending to need help with an assignment. She sits close to him, intentionally brushing her hand against his arm. She playfully started, you're so good at this, Jungkook. I don't know how I'd survive without your help. Jungkook chuckles politely, clearly uncomfortable but trying to be nice. He calmly said, it's nothing. Just make sure you focus on the formulas. Mia leans in slightly, lowering her voice, softly states, you know, YN is really lucky to have you. You're different from most guys. Jungkook looks up, narrowing his eyes slightly. He firmly asked, Mia, is there something you're trying to say? Mia pulls back, feigning embarrassment. She nervously said, oh, no. I didn't mean anything by it. I just admire you, that's all. Jungkook shakes his head, clearly not interested, and packs up his books. He politely states, I've got to go. Good luck with your assignment. He walks away, leaving Mia fuming. She clenches her fists, determined to make YN believe there's something between them. The next day, Mia finds YN in the college canteen, sitting with her lunch. She slides into the seat across from her, her expression troubled. She with seriousness started, YN, we need to talk. YN looks up, concerned by Mia's tone. She worriedly asked, what's wrong? Mia hesitates, as if debating whether to speak. Then, she sighs dramatically and softly states, it's about Jungkook. YN stiffens, setting her fork down. She narrowing her eyes asked, what about him? Mia looking conflicted continued, I didn't want to say anything, but I saw him at the library yesterday, with me. YN's heart sinks, but she tries to stay calm. She asked for clearance, what do you mean? Mia nervously said, we were studying together, and he was really sweet. He even said you didn't need to know because you'd get the wrong idea. YN's eyes widen, her stomach twisting with doubt. Mia places a hand on hers, pretending to comfort her and gently continued, I'm not saying he's cheating, YN. But, it felt like he didn't want you to know we were together. YN pulls her hand away, her mind spinning. She stands up abruptly, grabbing her bag and coldly said, I need to go. Mia watches her leave, a satisfied smirk on her face as she sips her drink. Her smug expression is unhideable. That evening, YN confronts Jungkook about Mia's claims, leading to an intense argument filled with emotion and misunderstanding. She angrily snorted, why didn't you tell me you were with Mia yesterday? Jungkook confusingly snapped back, what are you talking about? I wasn't hiding anything. YN scoffed and asked bitterly, then why did she say you didn't want me to know? Jungkook's eyes narrow, realizing what's happening. He firmly replied, she's lying, YN. I didn't say that, and there's nothing going on between us. Frustration was evident in YN's tone. She snorted, how am I supposed to believe that when she's the one who told me everything? Jungkook takes a deep breath, his voice softening as he steps closer. He gently said, because I'm telling you the truth, YN. You have to trust me, not her. YN hesitates, her emotions warring with her rationality. She turns away, her voice trembling. She softly stated, I don't know what to believe anymore. The argument ends with Jungkook looking hurt and determined to prove his innocence while YN struggles with her feelings of doubt. The next day in college, Jungkook is determined to execute his plan to get the evidence. He messaged Mia to meet her at the college corridor in the canteen time. Later Mia goes to meet him but YN sees her going in the other direction than the way to canteen, so she called her from behind but Mia didn't listen to her and continued walking. YN followed her till the corridor end and she see Jungkook standing there waiting for Mia. She felt a pang in her heart seeing this, so she left from there without waiting a moment more. It's late evening in their shared apartment. The tension is thick as YN sits on the couch, her hands clasped tightly together. She's been feeling guilty ever since her argument with Jungkook. Jungkook walks in, his expression cold and distant, carrying his phone in his hand. Without saying a word, he places it on the coffee table in front of her and sits down across the room. Jungkook calmly, but with an edge said, check it. YN looks at the phone, confused. She hesitates before picking it up. On the screen is a voice recording. She presses play, and Mia's voice fills the room. Mia's voice sad face laughing, I mean, come on, Jungkook. She doesn't deserve you. You and I are perfect together. Just give her some time to realize she's not the one for you. YN's eyes widen as the recording continues. Jungkook's voice responds, his tone sharp and dismissive. Jungkook's voice. On the recording, enough, Mia. Stop this. I don't feel anything for you, and I never will. YN is my wife, and you have no right to come between us. There's a brief pause before Mia's voice returns, sounding annoyed. Mia's voice. Huffing fine, but when she finds out we were together, she won't believe you anyway. She's too naive to see the truth. The recording ends. YN stares at the phone in shock, her hands trembling. She turned herself to Jungkook and softly started, "Jungkook. I." Jungkook crosses his arms, his face a mask of disappointment. He cuts her off by saying, "Leave it." YN looks up at him, tears brimming in her eyes. She pled, "I didn't know. Mia said so many things. She made it sound so real." Jungkook scoffs, standing up and pacing the room. He bitterly snorted, "And you believed her? Just like that, after everything we've been through?" YN flinches at the harshness in his tone. She stands up, stepping closer to him. She desperately trying to explain, "I was confused, Jungkook. I didn't want to believe her, but the way she said it. I'm sorry." Jungkook stops pacing, turning to face her. His voice softens slightly, but the hurt is still evident in his eyes. He quietly stated, "Do you have any idea how it feels to be accused of something I didn't do? To have you, of all people, doubt me?" YN's tears fall freely now. She reaches out to touch his arm, but he steps back, creating distance between them. She chokes on her words, "I know I messed up, Jungkook. I should have trusted you. Please, believe me when I say I'm sorry." Jungkook exhales deeply, running a hand through his hair. He looks at her, his expression conflicted. He softly said, "Sorry doesn't change the fact that you didn't trust me. That you let her get into your head." The silence stretches between them, heavy with emotion. YN wipes her tears, determined to make things right. She firmly states, "I'll make it up to you, Jungkook. I don't know how yet, but I will. You're right, I let my doubts get the better of me, and I hate myself for it. But I promise, I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust again." Jungkook studies her for a moment, his expression softening just a fraction. He sighs and walks toward the door, paused and turned around and said, "I need some air." He leaves the apartment, leaving YN standing alone, her heart heavy with guilt and determination. Later, as the night starts enveloping the evening, the soft glow of candles lit the small dining table, and the scent of a carefully prepared meal filled the apartment. YN adjusted the plates one last time, her hands trembling slightly as she heard the door open. Jungkook stepped in, his brows furrowing at the sight before him. "What's all this?" he asked, his voice tinged with confusion. "It's dinner for you," YN said softly, standing near the table with an apron still tied around her waist. Jungkook raised an eyebrow but took a seat, glancing at the dishes she had clearly put a lot of effort into. "You didn't have to do this." "I did," YN admitted, sitting across from him. "I wanted to say sorry. For everything." He paused, his expression softening. "You don't need to apologize, YN. If anyone should, it's me." "No, Jungkook," she interrupted, her voice earnest. "I haven't been perfect. I've made mistakes, too. I wanted to show you how much you mean to me. And that I'm willing to try harder, for us." Jungkook stared at her, the weight of her words settling in. He picked up his fork and took a bite, a small smile tugging at his lips. "This is good," he murmured. Relief washed over YN as she watched him eat, her heart pounding. "I wasn't sure you'd even want to sit with me tonight," she admitted. "Why wouldn't I?" Jungkook asked, setting his fork down. "You've been here for me more times than I can count. Even when I didn't deserve it." The room grew quiet, the candles flickering between them as they exchanged a look that held more meaning than words could express. YN took a deep breath, her voice trembling. "Jungkook, I care about you. A lot. I've tried to push it aside, but I can't anymore. You're everything to me." Jungkook's eyes widened slightly, the vulnerability in her confession hitting him hard. He leaned forward, his voice soft but steady. "YN, I've been so afraid of this. Of letting myself feel this way about you. But the truth is, I've felt it for a long time." Her breath caught as he continued, "I love you, YN. I just didn't know how to say it until now." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "I love you too," she whispered, her voice breaking. For a moment, the world seemed to stop as Jungkook rose from his chair, pulling her up with him. He cupped her face gently, his gaze searching hers. "You don't have to fight for me anymore. I'm already yours." Then Jungkook leans in, pressing his forehead to hers. He smiles faintly and said, "You're stuck with me now, you know." YN laughed softly, her hands resting on his chest. She replied, "I wouldn't have it any other way." He pulls her into a kiss, gentle, heartfelt, and filled with every unspoken promise they've held back. When they pull away, they're both smiling, the air between them lighter than it's been in weeks. "You really outdid yourself with dinner," he teased lightly, making her laugh. "Well, it worked, didn't it?" she replied with a grin. He nodded, his voice soft. "It did, and we'll get through this together. Starting with Mia." The cafe was quiet, the hum of conversation around them barely registering as YN and Jungkook sat across from Mia. YN's gaze was steady, while Jungkook's jaw tightened, his hand resting protectively on YN's. Mia leaned back, her expression guarded. "Why did you want to meet? I'm sure you two are busy." Jungkook didn't waste time. "We know what you've been doing, Mia. The lies, the rumors, trying to come between us. It stops now." Mia's eyes flickered to YN, her tone dismissive. "I was just looking out for you, Jungkook. You deserve someone who actually understands you." YN finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "If you were really his friend, you wouldn't try to manipulate him or disrespect our relationship. Jungkook doesn't need someone who tears others down in his life." Jungkook nodded, his voice unwavering. "YN's right. She's the person I want, Mia. I see that now, and nothing you say or do will change it." Mia's facade cracked, her confidence faltering under their united front. YN and Jungkook stood together, their bond unshaken as they walked out of the cafe, leaving Mia behind in silence. Later that evening room was heavy with silence, the weight of unspoken emotions pressing down on them. YN stood across from Jungkook, her expression soft but determined, while Jungkook sat on the edge of the couch, his head bowed and shoulders tense. "You can't keep avoiding them, Jungkook," YN said, her voice firm yet gentle. "Running away won't fix things. Sometimes, you have to face your fears, no matter how hard it feels." Jungkook looked up briefly, his jaw tightening as his eyes flickered with doubt. "I don't think I can. They'll never understand, never accept me for who I am." YN stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "You don't know that. They might be angry or disappointed at first, but they love you. You just have to give them the chance to see the real you." His throat worked as he swallowed hard, his voice cracking. "I'm scared." Her heart ached at his admission, but she reached out, resting a hand gently on his arm. "I'm scared too," she admitted softly. "But we don't get to control how people react. We only control how we face it. And you're not alone, Jungkook. I'm with you." Jungkook's gaze lifted to hers, his eyes searching her face as if trying to find the strength he lacked. "Why do you care so much?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. A small, bittersweet smile touched her lips. "Because you're not just some guy I'm stuck with. You matter to me, Jungkook. And this, facing it's important. For both of us." His expression shifted, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through his guarded demeanor. "You always know what to say, don't you?" She chuckled softly, her hand still on his arm. "I try, but the rest is up to you. If you want things to change, you have to take that first step." For a moment, he said nothing. Then he took a deep breath, his shoulders straightening as something resolute settled in his eyes. "Okay," he said, his voice steadier now. "I'll do it. For me. For you." YN's smile widened, her pride shining through. "I know you will." The next day, emboldened by YN's unwavering support, Jungkook stood outside the grand house he once called home. His hand trembled slightly, but YN's firm grip on his fingers steadied him. "You've got this," she said softly, her eyes filled with reassurance. "Whatever happens, I'm right here with you. Taking a deep breath, Jungkook rang the doorbell. The door creaked open to reveal his stepmother, her expression a mix of shock and unease. "Jungkook, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice hesitant. "I need to talk," Jungkook replied, his tone steady despite the storm raging within him. His father soon appeared behind her, his face etched with years of regret. They all moved to the living room, where the air felt thick with unspoken words. "I never stopped thinking about you," his father began quietly. "I know I failed you, and I'm sorry." Jungkook's jaw tightened, but his voice didn't waver. "You did fail me," he said firmly, his gaze unwavering. "But I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because I need to move on, and I need to hear you admit that you regret what you did." Tears streamed down his stepmother's face as she broke down. "I was jealous, bitter, and selfish," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I hurt you in ways I can never undo. I'm so sorry, Jungkook." Jungkook's grip on YN's hand tightened as he nodded slowly. Though forgiveness wasn't offered outright, the walls between them began to crack. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start, a promise to rebuild, one cautious step at a time. The warm sunlight poured into the spacious living room of their new mansion, casting a golden glow on the polished wooden floors. The sound of laughter echoed through the house as Jungkook carried a giggling little girl on his shoulders, her pigtails bouncing with every step. "Higher, Daddy," she squealed, her tiny hands gripping his hair for balance. "Okay, but don't pull too hard." Jungkook laughed, pretending to wobble as his son toddled after them, determined to catch up. YN watched from the couch, a serene smile on her face. She leaned back, her heart full as she cradled a steaming cup of tea. The twins had brought a chaos to their lives that was both exhausting and exhilarating, but she wouldn't trade it for anything. Jungkook plopped onto the couch beside her, their daughter tumbling into his lap while their son clambered up to sit next to YN. "I think we've officially worn him out," he said, brushing a stray strand of hair from YN's face. "Speak for yourself," YN teased, tickling their son's tummy until he squealed with delight. Their daughter yawned, her small head resting on Jungkook's chest. "Mommy, tell the story about how you and Daddy met," she mumbled sleepily. YN exchanged a knowing look with Jungkook, both of them grinning. "Maybe when you're a little older," she said gently, tucking a blanket around her. As the twins slowly drifted off to sleep, YN leaned into Jungkook's side, his arm wrapping around her shoulders. The house was quiet now, save for the soft breathing of their children and the faint rustle of the trees outside. Jungkook pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "We really did it, didn't we?" he murmured. YN smiled, her fingers intertwining with his. "Yeah, we really did." And in the soft glow of their new home, surrounded by the love they had fought so hard to build, Jungkook and YN knew one thing for certain: together, they could weather anything. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and it was more beautiful than either of them could have ever imagined.